The first thing I did when the Vreth transmission arrived was check the timestamp on my copy of the activation protocols. Not because I doubted the transmission. The instruments in Threshold Station Equatorial 7 had not misread an incoming signal in the 11 years I had worked there, and they were not misreading one now. The protocol's file timestamp was simply something I had been trained to check. My predecessor had told me the same thing she was told by hers. If the day ever came, check the timestamp first. Make sure the file is the one that was sealed into the station's read-only archive at founding, and not a drill record that had been accidentally migrated over. The distinction mattered. Drills were run from a copy. The sealed archive was the thing itself. The timestamp read, Year of Foundation, Day 1, 812,000 years ago, adjusted for drift. I set the check log aside and opened the protocols. My name is Myra Solon, and I have been the Archivist Warden of Threshold Station Equatorial 7 for 11 years, 4 months and 9 days. That sounds like a long time. In the context of what I am about to describe, it is a rounding error. The station I work in is older than my species' written memory of itself. The protocols I hold are older than every building currently standing on the equatorial plane above me. The thing those protocols describe, the machine they govern, the sequence they authorize was built and sealed into readiness before the first ancestor of anyone I have ever known drew breath. I am telling this story because someone should. Because the day the Vreth Dominion arrived over Earth, there were 41 people in this station, and only 2 of us understood in real time what we were actually watching. The other 39 were competent professionals who did exactly what the emergency doctrine told them to do, and they did it well, and none of them had the clearance to read past Section 4 of the protocols. I had the clearance to read all of it. My senior deputy, a man named Cassian Vrel, who has since retired to the Aldrich coast and spends his time fishing, had the same clearance. We read the whole thing together. In the 12 hours the Vreth fleet took to establish their transit position above the northern ecliptic. I want to be precise about what I felt during those 12 hours, because precision is the only honest approach to something this large. I did not feel fear, though the instruments told me there were 8,000 ships arranged in a survey approach formation above us, a number larger than anything the Galactic Survey Commission had ever recorded in a single fleet action. I did not feel awe exactly, though the Vreth Dominion was a civilization so old that their original survey citation for Earth predated our planet's first complex multicellular life. I did not feel triumph, because we had not done anything yet. We were 41 people in a buried station, reading a document, waiting for a machine to wake up. What I felt was something closer to recognition. The slow, vertiginous certainty that something enormous had always been true, and now I was simply standing close enough to see it. Let me tell you what I knew about the Vreth Dominion before that morning. I had read about them in the Survey Commission historical archives, which are part of the reference library every archivist warden is required to maintain. The Vreth are a mineral caste civilization. Their entire social structure, their hierarchy, their theology, their expansion logic, all of it derives from extraction. They do not conquer territory for land or population. They do not colonize for agriculture or living space. They survey planets for mineral value, file provisional survey rights under the Commission's extraction reserve protocols, and then withdraw. The reserve sits on record. When their economic cycle comes around, or when the civilization needs the resource, they return to claim it. Earth had been surveyed by a Vreth Dominion deep probe fleet 800,000 years ago. The probe records showed a geologically active world with abundant mineral stratification, rare earth concentrations in the upper mantle, heavy metal deposits in the old seafloor beds, and a thin biosphere in early development that the survey team had cataloged as non-sapient and low resistance. They filed a provisional extraction reserve with the Galactic Survey Commission, designated Earth as a dormant deposit, and withdrew. The reserve notice sat in the Commission archive for 800,000 years. No follow-up claim, no secondary survey. Just the original filing, active and legally valid, waiting for the Dominion to return. The thing the survey team's instruments had not caught, or had not weighted correctly, was the biosphere. It was thin and early, and they had rated it non-sapient. They were not wrong about what they saw. They were only wrong about what it would become. In 800,000 years, an early biosphere can become quite a lot of things. In 800,000 years, a sapient species can build and grieve and learn and remember and dig very deeply into the rock beneath their feet. I knew all of this from the Commission archives. The VRETH's original survey team had been thorough, professional, and entirely correct about everything they measured on the day they measured it. What they had not measured, because it had not yet been built, was the Oreth array. The array's existence is not classified. Its existence has never been classified. The reason very few people know about it is simply that it is 800,000 years old, buried under 400 meters of consolidated equatorial bedrock, and for the last 790,000 years, it has been doing nothing that any instrument would flag as interesting. It draws a small, steady current from the deep geothermal tap that was installed alongside it at the station's founding. It runs what the protocols describe as a calibration check on a cycle of roughly 200 years. A brief, low-frequency pulse that confirms all lattice nodes are intact and responsive. Between those pulses, it is silent. The calibration pulses are logged here in this station. I have reviewed the logs. They go back to year of foundation, day 1. 812,000 years of 200-year pulses, every one recorded, every one green. 41 people in this station across 11 generations of postings, and not one of us had ever had a reason to read past the first paragraph of Section 1 of the activation protocols, because the protocols are only relevant when the array is needed. The array had never been needed, until the morning the VRETH Dominion arrived. I will describe the station for context, because it matters to what happened. Threshold Station Equatorial 7 sits at a depth of 412 meters beneath the equatorial plane, in a reinforced cavity carved from the original bedrock by the station's founders. The cavity is large. It was designed to be permanent and is large enough to house 40 people comfortably, with room for expanded staff if the mission ever required it. The access shaft comes down through a surface installation that the casual observer would identify as a geological survey relay. A small, unremarkable structure behind a chain-link enclosure, with a weather instrument array on the roof and a locked door. The lock is a standard Commission registry deadbolt that has been replaced twice in my tenure. Beneath that locked door, beneath the access shaft, beneath the reinforced cavity and its 41 occupants, beneath another 12 meters of original bedrock, the Oreth array waits. I have never been down to the array chamber. Station wardens are not cleared for physical access to the chamber, only for the control interface in the upper station, which connects to the array through a hardened relay trunk. The chamber itself is sealed with a lock that is not a standard Commission registry deadbolt. The last time the chamber door was opened, according to the station records, was during the final construction inspection. The date of that inspection is the same as the file timestamp I checked that morning. Year of foundation, day 1, 812,000 years ago. Nobody has been inside that chamber since the day the array was finished. The VRETH transmission arrived at 4:12 hours station time. I was awake. I keep odd hours, a habit from my first posting, and I received the alert on my personal log panel before the duty officer sent the general alarm. The transmission was in Commission standard, which surprised me. I had expected the Dominion to transmit in their own language and let the translation matrix handle it. Commission standard suggested they were operating with the expectation of being received and understood, which in turn suggested their historical records on Earth were current enough to know that Commission standard, was our operational language. The content was brief, formal in the way that 800,000-year-old bureaucratic language tends to be formal, layered with honorifics and procedural framing that the translation matrix rendered into a kind of archaic stiffness. But the substance was simple. The Vreth Dominion announced their return to the extraction reserve designated E7 Equatorial in the Galactic Survey Commission records. They presented their provisional survey rights filing number and the original claim date. They noted the elapsed time since survey as a routine administrative matter. They requested that any sapient entities present on the planet's surface identify themselves, register their legal status with the Dominion Survey Authority, and comply with the Extraction Reserve Clearance Protocol, which required all non-Vreth personnel to vacate the designated reserve area within a standard commission processing cycle. That last clause, the clearance protocol, the vacate notice, was written in the same archaic stiffness as everything else. It was not a threat. It was a form. The Vreth had been doing this for longer than our species had existed. They had a form for everything. I sat in my chair for a moment after reading it. Then I pulled up the activation protocols. The protocols are 47 sections long. Most of them are technical, lattice node specifications, calibration override codes, power routing diagrams, maintenance schedules that had been run and rerun and run again across 800,000 years of duty cycles. I read the technical sections because I had been trained to read everything before acting, and because I wanted to understand what I was authorizing before I authorized it. But the operational core of the protocols is in Section 3, and Section 3 is only 6 paragraphs. I will summarize what it said. The Orath array was built for one purpose, not defense, not communication, not weapon deployment. The array was built to file a document. Specifically, to transmit the Earth Planetary Claim Lock filing, a Survey Commission legal instrument, already prepared and sealed into the array's transmitter core at founding, simultaneously to every Commission relay station within the array's broadcast range, which at full power extended to approximately 800 relay nodes across the intergalactic survey grid. The filing had been completed and authenticated 812,000 years ago. It had been prepared by a legal team whose names I cannot read in the current standard script, but whose work I had just spent 20 minutes confirming was airtight. The document established Earth as a sapient inhabited world under Commission protection, retroactive to the date of the Vreth's original survey, thereby voiding the extraction reserve on the grounds that the Vreth survey team had misclassified the planet's biosphere status, and that the provisional reserve, under Commission Regulation 7 Alpha, could not apply to a world with a protected sapient population. The filing had been ready for 800,000 years. It could not be transmitted without the triggering condition, because without the triggering condition, there was nothing to file against. Unilateral claim lock filings had to be filed in response to a rival claim event. That was Commission procedure. You could not preemptively dissolve a reserve with no active claimant in the room. You needed the claimant to show up first. Section 3, Paragraph 4, said it plainly. The activation protocols exist to ensure that when the Vreth Dominion returns, and the Founders considered their return a matter of when, not if, the Earth Planetary Claim Lock filing is transmitted within the same Commission processing window as the Dominion's arrival transmission. This ensures that the arrival transmission and the Dominion fleet itself serve as the witnessing event required by Commission Regulation 7 Alpha, Section 9, Subclause Roman 2, which states that a claim lock filing superseding a provisional extraction reserve must be filed and received in the presence of a valid witness to the rival claim, and that a rival claimant's fleet and system at the time of filing constitutes valid witnessing. The Founders had thought through the legal procedure with the same precision they had brought to everything else. I set the protocols down and looked at Cassian Vrel, who had come in from the duty bay when the alert went out and was standing at the secondary panel with his coffee going cold in his hand. "Have you read to Section 3? I asked. "I'm in Section 4, he said. He did not look up from his panel. "The transmission routing table. Section 3 is the important one." He turned then. He looked at me across the width of the upper station room, in the blue-white light of the instrument panels, and I could see that he had understood Section 3 the same way I had, not with excitement or with fear, but with that same slow, vertiginous recognition. "They came back," he said. "Yes. And they came back with a fleet big enough that the Commission will record it. 8,000 ships in survey approach formation," I said. "The instruments have the count within a margin of 40, accounting for what may be shielded. The Commission relay at L2 will have an independent record of the arrival by now." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the station's seismic sensors, I could feel nothing. The equatorial plane above us was as still as it had ever been. But the upper atmosphere was beginning to show the entry heat signatures of Vreth descent scouts, small craft burning down through the ionosphere to begin their surface mapping sweep. They were being thorough. They were being professional. They were doing exactly what a survey empire does when it returns to a dormant reserve after 800,000 years. "How long does the transmission take?" Cashin asked. "The claim lock broadcast." "Approximately 90 seconds at full array power," I said, reading from Section 7. "The Commission relay acknowledgement will come back in roughly 4 hours, depending on relay traffic, but the filing timestamp is recorded at the moment of transmission, not at acknowledgement. The moment we send it, it's filed." "And the Vreth transmission, their arrival notice to the Commission relay?" "Arrived before hours," I said. "By approximately 43 minutes, accounting for signal lag. They were careful. They transmitted on arrival. They were establishing their claim record in real time." Cashin set his coffee down on the panel edge. It was a careful, deliberate motion, the kind a person makes when they are doing something with their hands so that the rest of them can think. "So by the time we transmit," he said slowly, "their fleet arrival is already in the Commission record." "As a witnessing event," I said, "yes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The founders knew they would do that. The Vreth have filed extraction reserve claims for, according to the Commission archive, approximately 11 million years. Their legal procedure has not changed in that time. When a Vreth survey fleet returns to a reserve, they transmit a formal arrival notice to the nearest Commission relay immediately on transit arrival. It establishes their legal presence in system before any counterclaim can be filed. It is their standard practice. It has been their standard practice for 11 million years. And the founders read that practice," Cashin said, "and built the trigger around it." "Yes." He looked at me for a moment, and then he looked at the activation protocol on my panel, and then he looked at the section header on the relay trunk control interface, which I had already opened. The interface was simple. The founders had not complicated something they intended to survive for 800,000 years. A single activation key, held in the secure drawer of the archivist warden's desk since the station's founding. A confirm panel. A broadcast initiation sequence that the protocols said would run automatically once confirmed, requiring no further input. "Do we need to call anyone?" Cashin asked. I had already looked at Section 5, which addressed the question of authorization. The archivist warden held sole authority for array activation. The protocols were explicit. The founders had judged that a chain of command long enough to require consultation would also be long enough to be slow. 800,000 years ago, the people who built this station had already decided they could not predict what the world above us would look like when the day came. They had decided they could not count on being able to reach anyone above this station in the time a Vreth arrival window required. They had given the activation authority to the station itself, to the person sitting at this desk, reading these protocols in the hours after the transmission arrived. The authority was mine. No, I said, we don't call anyone. I opened the secure drawer. The key was there in a sealed case whose lock I had never opened. I broke the seal. The case held the key in a single sheet of material, not paper, something harder and more permanent, with text pressed into it rather than printed on it, that bore a short message from the station's first archivist warden. I read it before I picked up the key, because it seemed wrong not to. The message said, "If you are reading this, the Vreth have returned. Do your job, we built this for you, trust the work." I held the key for a moment. It was heavier than it looked, a physical object that had been locked in that drawer for 812,000 years, handed down through how many generations of postings I couldn't calculate, waiting for the one warden who would actually need to use it. I wondered briefly about all the wardens before me who had broken a seal and read that note. Wait, no, that couldn't be right. The case was sealed. They had never opened it. They had checked the drawer was there, confirmed the case was present and sealed, logged it in the duty record, and left it for the next posting. I was the first person to read that note since the person who wrote it. I put the key in the interface slot and turned it. The relay trunk board came to life in a way I had not seen it do before, not the dim standby amber of routine operations, but a full activation white that lit every panel in the upper station. Cashin stepped back from it without thinking. The duty officer on the floor below called up through the intercom to ask if there was a system alert. I told her to stand by and keep the staff at stations. The confirm panel showed a single prompt: Initiate ORATH array broadcast sequence. Below it, in the same archaic rendering style as the protocols themselves, a second line: This action is irrevocable. The transmission will be filed. Cashin read it over my shoulder. Irrevocable, he said, not as a question. The founders were specific about that. A claim lock filing that can be recalled is not a claim lock filing. The Commission doesn't accept conditional filings. The moment we transmit, it's permanent. They've been above us for less than 12 hours. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. The surface feeds were showing the Vreth descent scouts now in the visible spectrum, small craft, 3 of them in a triangular survey pattern over the equatorial plane, moving at about 8 kilometers per minute, running their instruments over the rock below, looking for mineral concentrations, looking for the things their original survey had marked. They were doing their job. They had come back after 800,000 years to do their job. They haven't done anything to us, Cashin said. It was not a protest. It was precision, the same thing I valued in him. No, I said. The clearance notice was a form. The form requires compliance within a commission processing cycle. We are within that window. Technically, we haven't failed to comply yet. But we're not going to comply. We're going to transmit a document that makes the clearance notice legally void. Yes. He was quiet for another moment. The scouts had turned and were running a second pass over a different section of the plane. One of them passed almost directly above our access shaft, and I watched the surface camera track it, a sleek, dark craft, not large, with the Dominion survey markings in their script along the hull. It didn't know we were there. The founders could have filed a counterclaim through normal commission channels, Cashin said. Submitted the biosphere reclassification evidence through the standard process. Yes, the commission review process for a biosphere reclassification of a provisional extraction reserve takes approximately 1,400 years, accounting for standard processing queues and the 3 required independent verification surveys. During that review period, the Dominion has the legal right to conduct non-destructive survey operations, which typically includes seismic mapping to a depth of 600 meters. The station is at 412. Cashin said nothing. Founders did not want a legal process that lasted 1,400 years, I said, and they did not want to find out what non-destructive survey operations looked like from the inside. So they built this instead. An instrument capable of broadcasting authenticated filing, already prepared, already legally complete, to 800 commission relay nodes simultaneously, in 90 seconds, in the moment the rival claimant arrived and established themselves as the required witnessing party. A legal ambush, Cashin said. A prepared answer, I said. They knew the Vreth would come back. They spent the time before they came back building a response. The only thing they needed was for the Vreth to show up and make themselves legal witnesses. He looked at me, I looked at him. The white light of the activated relay trunk filled the room between us. "Do it," he said. I pressed the confirm panel. What happened next was not dramatic, in the way that the largest events in a civilization's history are sometimes not dramatic at the human scale. There was a low, cycling vibration through the station floor, not strong, barely perceptible through my boots, but present in a way it had never been before, as the array below us drew on the geothermal tap at full power for the first time in 812,000 years. The relay trunk panel ran a sequence display, lattice node activation in segments from the eastern equatorial ring to the western, all of them lighting green. 144 nodes, 14 subnodes each. The display ran green for 41 seconds, then it held on broadcast active. The transmission ran for 87 seconds. Then it was done. The confirm panel cleared. A new line appeared, filing complete, timestamp recorded. Then below it, in the same press text archaic rendering that felt, even now, like the voice of someone who had been waiting 800,000 years to speak, Orath array broadcast sequence concluded. Earth planetary claim lock filing transmitted to 847 commission relay nodes. Acknowledgement window, 3.8 to 6.2 hours. Cashin sat down in the secondary chair. He put his hands flat on the panel edge and looked at the completed display for a long time. 847 nodes, he said. Not 800. The relay grid expanded since founding. The array's broadcast radius was fixed at its original specification, but the number of commission relay nodes within that radius has grown over 800,000 years. The founders specified the range. They couldn't specify how many nodes there would be. So we just filed that document with nearly 50 more relay nodes than they planned for. Yes. He sat with that. Above us, the Vreth scout craft continued their systematic survey of the equatorial plane. The main fleet was still holding at survey approach position above the northern ecliptic, which the duty officer reported every 30 minutes as if I might have forgotten. They had not begun any approach that suggested they were aware of anything unusual below. The transmission from the array had been in commission relay frequencies, not broadcast openly, not transmitted to the Dominion fleet. There was no reason for the scouts to have detected anything. The Vreth Dominion did not know what had just happened. They would not know until the commission relays processed the filing and issued their acknowledgement. And by then, it would be irrevocably in the record, timestamped to the same commission processing window as the Dominion's arrival transmission, with the Dominion's own arrival message serving as the required rival claim witnessing event. Their own legal procedure, the one they had followed for 11 million years, was the thing that had handed us the trigger. I thought about the founders. I do not know their names, most of them. The station's founding records preserve the names of the senior archivist warden at the time of founding, a woman whose name in the old rendering is something close to Sale Viren, and the names of the lead array engineers, and the lead legal team who prepared the claim lock filing, but the ranks below that are largely gone, eroded by 800,000 years of record transfers and data migrations and the ordinary entropy of time. I know they existed. I know they worked for something on the order of 200 years to build the array, which is approximately how long the lattice construction took at the engineering scales available at that time. I know they came in from somewhere, not Earth-born, or not all of them, and they chose to bury themselves in the equatorial rock and build something that none of them would ever see used. They did not build it for themselves. It would not be finished in their lifetimes. Their children would not see it used. Their grandchildren would not. They were building for a day that was 800,000 years away, for people whose existence they could not have predicted, against a legal problem whose exact shape they somehow understood clearly enough to prepare for it with precision. They had trusted the Vreth to behave like the Vreth. They had trusted the Commission's legal framework to remain stable enough to matter. They had trusted the rock to hold the array intact across a span of time, longer than the written history of every species currently registered with the Commission. And they had trusted whoever was sitting at this desk, on the day the transmission arrived, to read the protocols, understand the instrument, and press the confirm panel without hesitation. I did not hesitate. For whatever it's worth, for the record, I did not hesitate. Cashin made the station log entry at 7:11 hours station time, which was the time the broadcast display cleared. He wrote it in plain Commission standard, in the format the protocols specified for activation events. Date, activation authority, triggering event, array status post-activation, filing timestamp, estimated acknowledgement window. 7 lines. He then appended the standard post-activation duty note, which was also in the protocols and which I will reproduce here, because someone put a great deal of care into that wording, and it deserves to be preserved. Station log, the threshold station equatorial 7. Activation event recorded. The ORATH array has discharged its founding purpose. The Earth planetary claim lock filing has been transmitted and filed. This station now enters archive status. All subsequent duty is standard monitoring only. He read it back to me when he was done. I nodded. He saved it. At 7:44 hours, the Vreth Dominion Fleet's communications officer transmitted a second message to the surface. This one was less formal than the first. The translation matrix rendered it with less archaic stiffness, which suggested either a different officer or a deliberate shift in register. It noted that the survey scouts had completed a preliminary pass of the equatorial zone and detected no significant surface infrastructure, no energy signature above baseline geological activity, and no organized population centers in the survey area. It requested any sapient entities on the planet's surface to transmit their legal status and population coordinates so that the Dominion clearance protocol could be correctly administered. I read it in full, then I set it in the response queue and did not respond. This was also in the protocols. Section 3, Paragraph 6, 1 sentence. The station makes no further response to Vreth communications after activation. The filing speaks. At 1003 hours, the first Commission relay acknowledgement arrived. It was from L2, the nearest relay, 12 light minutes out, where acknowledgement timing put the filing as received approximately 4 minutes after our transmission. The acknowledgement was a standard Commission filing receipt. Date received, filing number assigned, classification logged, reviewing authority assigned. In the Commission's numbering, it was the first planetary claim lock filing against a provisional extraction reserve in approximately 11,000 years, which made it unusual enough that the reviewing authority assigned was the Commission's senior survey adjudication panel rather than a routine clerk. The filing number the Commission assigned was E7 Equatorial Lock 001. They had left the slot open. For 800,000 years, that filing number had been reserved in the Commission archive, waiting to be issued. Somewhere in the Commission's administrative records, 800,000 years ago, someone had understood what the founders were building and had reserved the number for it. At 10:19 hours, Cashin brought me a cup of tea. I do not usually drink tea. He does not usually make it. He set it on my panel edge without comment and went back to his station. Between 1100 and 1600 hours, acknowledgements came in from relay nodes across the network, in the sequence their distances from Earth determined. Each one issued the same filing receipt. By the end of that window, 312 of the 847 nodes had acknowledged. The rest would follow over the next several days as the signals reached them at the speed of light. But those 312 alone represented a coverage area that included every commission jurisdiction in the intergalactic survey grid, and every commission court that had authority over Vreth Dominion transit and survey licensing. At 12:37 hours, the Vreth fleet changed posture. The duty officer reported it first. The main fleet, which had been holding steady at survey approach position, had begun a slow reformation. Not an approach, a regrouping. The 8,000 ships were moving from survey approach, spread into what the duty officer identified as transit preparation formation, the clustering pattern that preceded a jump. She reported it 3 times in 10 minutes, with increasing uncertainty in her voice, because it made no procedural sense for a survey fleet that had just completed a preliminary pass to be preparing for transit departure. I understood what had happened before she finished her third report. The commission relay at L2, the one that had acknowledged our filing at 1003 hours, was a public relay. It logged all filed documents in real time to a publicly accessible archive record. The Vreth Dominion fleet almost certainly had a commission relay monitor aboard their flagship, because all survey fleets of their experience carried them. They would have seen the filing receipt appear in the L2 public archive at approximately the same time we received our acknowledgement, perhaps a few minutes earlier, given the geometry of their position. They had seen the filing number, E7 Equatorial Lock 001. They would have known immediately what it was. The extraction reserve filing number was E7 Equatorial PROV 8412, provisional, survey reservation. The lock filing superseding it was directly associated. The Commission's numbering protocol tied them explicitly. Any Vreth survey officer with standard Commission archive access would have seen the connection in seconds. What happened next, inside the Vreth fleet, I cannot fully reconstruct. I was not there. What I can reconstruct is this. The Commission's filing receipt for E7 Equatorial Lock 001 included the timestamp, which was within the same Commission processing window as the Dominion's own arrival transmission, which meant the witnessing requirement of Regulation 7 Alpha was satisfied. It included the legal authority under which the filing voided the extraction reserve, citing the biosphere reclassification evidence that the legal team had attached to the filing 800,000 years ago. Evidence, built from fossil records and biological sampling, that the founders had gathered before they left Earth. The filing also included, in the standard claim lock attachment package, a secondary commission instrument that the founders had apparently prepared in parallel. A formal notification to the Commission Survey Authority that the Vreth Dominion's Provisional Survey Reservation, E7 Equatorial PROV 8412, had been voided, which under the Commission's Extraction Reserve Protocol, Article 14, triggered an automatic review of all other Vreth provisional reserves filed within the same survey epoch, on the grounds that if one survey classification had been materially incorrect, the epoch's other classifications were subject to audit. The founders had known that the Vreth's survey, epoch 800,000 years ago, had been a large one. They had known the Commission archive contained other Vreth provisional reserves from that period. They had prepared a mechanism to bring all of them into review simultaneously. I did not know this was in the filing until I read the full acknowledgement documentation that afternoon. I sat with it for a long time. The filing was not just a defense of Earth. It was a challenge to the entire Vreth survey record from that epoch. Every provisional reserve the Dominion held from 800,000 years ago, and the Commission archive listed 47 of them, was now subject to Commission audit. The Vreth transit licenses in those zones were suspended pending review. The legal and administrative weight of the filing, compounded by the 47 parallel audit triggers, was something that would take the Commission's senior survey adjudication panel years, possibly decades, to fully process. The founders had spent 200 years building the array. They had spent considerably more time than that preparing what it would transmit. At 1612 hours, the Vreth fleet completed its transit preparation formation and jumped. 8,000 ships. They had arrived in survey approach spread, professional and confident, carrying an 800,000-year-old extraction reserve document that they had every reason to believe was legally valid. They had transmitted a clearance notice to an apparently empty planet. They had sent scouts to map the surface. They had done everything correctly. And then they had watched a filing receipt appear in the Commission archive that made their reserve void, their arrival transmission into the witnessing event that triggered the voiding, and their 47 other reserves across the survey grid into open audit territory. They did not transmit anything before they jumped. Not to us, not to the Commission. The transit jump was their answer, or rather, their recognition that there was no answer to give, not in this window, possibly not for a very long time. A legal response to a Commission claim lock filing of this scale, backed by 800,000 years of time-stamped evidence, prepared by a legal team the Commission had no record of but whose work was now in the system, and would have to be formally contested through official channels if the Dominion wished to dispute it. That was not a process that resolved in an afternoon. It was not a process that resolved in a decade. The Vreth Dominion left Earth's sky the way you leave a situation you cannot immediately compute. Orderly, purposeful, saying nothing. Cashin stood at the surface feed panel and watched the last of their transit signatures clear the upper ecliptic. He stood there for a while after they were gone, looking at the empty sky on the feed. "Did you know about the Epic Audit Clause?" he asked. "I read it for the first time this afternoon," I said. "It was in the secondary attachment package. I wasn't briefed on it." "Nobody was briefed on it," he said. "The protocols don't mention it." "No, the protocols cover the array and the claim lock filing. The secondary package was apparently prepared by the same legal team, filed into the array's transmitter core at founding alongside the claim lock, and transmitted as part of the same broadcast. The protocols didn't need to describe it. The array sent everything it was given." He was quiet for a long time. Outside, or rather above us, the equatorial plane was as still as it had been that morning. The Vreth scouts had broken off their survey runs at around the same time the fleet changed posture. The surface cameras showed nothing now but rock and sky, and the late afternoon angle of the sun across the plain. "The legal team," Cashin said, "prepared a counterclaim for one reserve and an audit trigger for 47, and filed both into the same machine. And the machine held them for 812,000 years and transmitted them in 90 seconds. Yes. And they knew the Vreth would come back. They considered it a matter of when," I said. He turned from the surface feed and looked at me. The white light of the relay trunk had dimmed back to standby amber. The array had completed its purpose, and the trunk was running cool now, the way a thing runs after it has done the work it was made for. The display still showed filing complete. It would show that until the next duty cycle cleared it, which I had decided to let run long. I wanted to see it for a while. "And nobody knew," Cashin said. "Nobody currently living. The legal team, the array engineers, they've been dead for 800,000 years. Sale Viren has been dead for 800,000 years. The people who planned this and built this and trusted it to hold have been dead longer than our species has been sapient. And it worked." "Yes." He sat down again. He looked at the filing complete display for a while. "There's a duty report to write," he said eventually. "Yes. The activation protocols have a format for the post-event report, Section 45. I know. It asks for the Archivist Warden's assessment of array performance. I know. What are you going to write?" I thought about it. I thought about the note in the sealed case, the note I had read before I picked up the key. The message from the first warden, from the person sitting at this desk 812,000 years ago on the day they sealed that case and put it in the drawer. Trust the work. 2 words that had sat in a locked case for longer than the written history of our species, waiting for someone to open it and read them. I'm going to write that it functioned as specified, I said, and that the legal team's filing was complete. Cashin nodded. That seemed right to him. It seemed right to me. There were 41 people in this station who would write reports in their own formats and through their own chains of supervisory authority about what they had witnessed from sections 1 through 4 of the protocols. The visible part, the instruments and the fleet tracking and the transit departure, the shape of what they had been allowed to see. Those reports would go up through the duty chain and eventually into whatever record-keeping authority the Commission and our own administrative structure thought was appropriate. They would take care of themselves. The archivist warden's report would go into the station archive. It would be classified at the same level as the protocols themselves, which meant it would be available to future wardens but not to general distribution. I would write it carefully, in plain language, covering what happened and when and what each section of the protocols authorized. I would attach the relay acknowledgement log, all 847 of them as they came in, and the Commission filing receipt for E7 Equatorial Lock 001, and the duty officer's tracking log of the Vreth fleet's departure. And I would put Cashin's log entry, the 7 lines, and the post-activation duty note at the front of it where it belonged, because someone had put a great deal of care into that wording, and it deserved to be the first thing the next archivist warden read when they opened this file. We received the last relay acknowledgement 19 days later from a node near the outer survey grid boundary at the edge of the array's broadcast range. 847 acknowledgements, one for each node, spread across 19 days as the signal reached them in sequence. I logged every one. Cashin made tea every morning that week, and I kept drinking it, which surprised us both. The Commission's Senior Survey Adjudication Panel opened formal proceedings on the Earth Planetary Claim Lock, filing 6 weeks after the filing date. They assigned a panel of 11 adjudicators and established a preliminary review timeline of 3 to 5 years. The epic audit of the Vreth Dominion's other reserves was assigned to a separate but parallel subpanel. The Vreth Dominion filed a preliminary objection to the claim lock, filing 7 weeks after the filing date. Their legal team had clearly needed time to find the procedural grounds, which told me the filing had been as unexpected to their counsel as it had been to their survey officers. The preliminary objection was 43 pages long, which the Commission's review clerk told me was the longest preliminary objection filed in this jurisdiction in 400 years. The objection cited 17 procedural points. The Commission's review clerk also told me, informally, that the claim lock filing itself was the most complete biosphere reclassification package she had ever processed, and that 3 of her colleagues had asked to be assigned to the review because they had never seen historical biological evidence compiled to this degree of precision. Sailviron's legal team had been thorough. The preliminary objection was dismissed 8 months later on all 17 points. The Commission upheld the claim lock filing as validly transmitted and received. The Earth Planetary Claim Lock filing for E7 Equatorial entered permanent commission status on that date. The Extraction Reserve E7 Equatorial PROV 8412 was formally dissolved. The Vreth Dominion's epic audit proceeded in parallel, and at last report, which is current to the date I am writing this account. 16 of the 47 reserves under audit have been found to require biosphere reclassification review, and the audit is ongoing. I stayed as archivist warden for another 3 years after the activation event. Then I passed the position to my deputy, not Cashin, who had retired to his coast by then, but a younger officer named Pel Uran, who read the protocols on his first day and told me the epic audit clause had made him laugh out loud in a way that was not entirely dignified. I told him that was the correct response. I am writing this account because someone should. The people who built the array cannot write it. The legal team who prepared the filing cannot write it. Sale Viren cannot write it. The people who worked for 200 years on a machine they would never see used, who prepared a legal case for a dispute that would not arrive for 800,000 years, who sealed a note into a locked case for someone they would never know, they cannot write any of it. I can. I was there, I turned the key. There is a thing I have thought about often in the years since, and I want to put it into the record while I still can. The founders could have chosen to build a weapon. If your civilization has 200 years and the resources to construct a planet-scale energy lattice array across the equatorial ring, you can build things that destroy. You can build things that threaten. You can build things that announce, in terms the Vreth Dominion would have understood with no translation required, that returning to this planet carries a cost in lives and ships that their survey operation is not worth. They did not do that. They built a filing system. They looked at an empire that had been doing the same legal procedure for 11 million years, and they understood that the procedure was the empire's foundation, that the Vreth did not operate outside their own legal framework any more than a building operates outside its own load-bearing structure. And they prepared something that worked inside that framework perfectly, that gave the Commission's own instruments no choice but to uphold, that required the Vreth to show up and do exactly what they always did in order to activate it. The founders trusted the structure. They trusted that the Commission's legal framework would endure long enough to matter. They trusted that the Vreth would be what they had always been. They trusted the rock. They trusted whoever would sit at this desk. I think about the note in the case a great deal. Trust the work. It is the most compressed account of everything they did that I can imagine. 200 years of construction, 800,000 years of calibration pulses running green, a legal team preparing a document that would wait in the dark until it was needed, a message sealed into a locked case for a person who did not yet exist, from a person who had already been dead longer than the memory of our species. They trusted the work. They trusted us to do our part, which was to read the protocols and press the confirm panel and not hesitate. I did not hesitate. The equatorial plane above Threshold Station, Equatorial 7, looks the same as it did on the morning the Vreth arrived. The surface cameras show rock and sky and the ordinary drift of weather across the old geology. The access shaft goes up to the locked door and the chain-link enclosure and the weather instruments on the roof. Below the station, the array is quiet again, back on its 200-year calibration cycle, lattice nodes running green geothermal tap at maintenance draw. The filing complete display cleared on the next duty cycle, as I said it would. The secure drawer is closed. The key is back inside it in the case with the seal repaired. The drawer is locked. The case contains the key and the note, and now also a second note, mine, written on the same kind of hard material as the original, with the text pressed in that says, "The filing was transmitted. The work held. Trust whoever comes next." I do not know if anyone will ever need to open that case again. The claim lock filing is permanent. The reserve is dissolved. The array's founding purpose has been discharged, which the protocols say means the station enters archive status and standard monitoring duty. But the array is still there, still running its pulses every 200 years, still drawing its quiet current from the deep geothermal tap, still waiting in the way that things built for the long work wait, without urgency, without impatience, without any concern for the time that passes between one pulse and the next. It was built to wait. It waited. Then it did what it was built to do. I pressed the confirm panel. I did not hesitate. That is the whole of my part. The rest was already done.